All right. So today's question is from Myra. I'm starting to think we should just have her on the show so she can just like ask all the questions that she has. But anyways, today's question is tips for staying in the good books for everyone on the client's team, including the finance department. So we both had different ways of answering this, but before we even get into that, we should probably just talk about why this is even important. And you had some pretty good thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. So the question is like, why do you even want to stay in the good books of everyone on the client's team? I think that there can be good motivations for that and not so good motivations for that. So starting with like the not so good motivations is if you just have an attachment to having everyone like you. If you're just kind of like a people pleaser, you hate disappointing people. Maybe you're Canadian, not Josh,
Although
but
we established between us that you are the one that likes to please people more than
I
I, so
know. Maybe
we're just
you should
smashing
be in New
stereotypes.
York. You should be in New York where no one cares, and I'll go to Canada and just say sorry to everyone all the time.
Sorry. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah. So I'm very much like that. Like if I think that someone's mad at me or something, I'll walk around all day thinking about it. And so just an idea that I got from Blair Enns, who we should probably put on our bingo card, is what he advises is for people to sort of take an inventory of what their own attachments and needs are. And one of those needs could be, some of us are really attached to what he calls like we're high in affiliation needs, which is another way of saying that we want or need people to like us. And the thing about an attachment is that it doesn't bring any value to the client. It's entirely focused on you and your own needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to remember that just because you want people to like you, that's not valuable for anyone. It kind of reminds me of like in The Office, there's a Michael Scott quote where he says something like, he's like, do I need to be liked? No, I don't need to be liked. I like to be liked. I enjoy to be liked. I have to be liked, but it's not a compulsive need like
Yeah.
my need for praise. So, it's entirely valid, and I think it says good things about you if you're high in that affiliation need. But it's not necessarily what the reason that you want to get people on your client's team and your client to like you. So in terms of good reasons, it's good for business. So if the client and their team like you, you're more likely to get rehired. You're going to get, when you reach out to someone on the team for access to some resource, they're going to be a lot faster in getting that back to you. They're not going to drag their feet because they don't like you. In the case of the finance team, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds. Like you definitely don't want people on the finance team to not like you.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're doing TV show quotes, another good one that I thought of when we were talking about this is from Mad Men. There's a line where Roger Sterling says, "Half the time this business comes down to I don't like that guy." So
That's actually really good. And yeah, that reminds me of what I was going to say as well, which is like don't underestimate the power of just being liked and familiar. Like if you work with a client and they like you and you did a pretty good job, the idea of going out into like the wild, wild west and trying to find a replacement is painful. And they're just gonna be like, you know what? Let's just go with Andrew again. Like he did a good job. I liked working with him. Like, why are we going to revisit that whole evaluation process and potentially choose someone who isn't very good at all, right?
yeah, exactly, for sure. And so the last thing before, we put together a nice long list of tips for how you can get and stay in everyone's good books. But one other mindset thing is that like ultimately you can't micromanage other people's opinions. You can do all of these things that we're talking about, and some people may still just not like you. If you have a good, nice, long, healthy career, I'm sure at some point there will be people on your client's team who just don't like you for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. And a lot of it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong. Not everyone likes everyone, and that's okay. The goal isn't for everyone, 100% of people who you work with to like you. It's not really a business goal.
For sure. Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll get into it. And before we do, I think we both thought about this in different ways based on the different way that we tend to work with clients. So for me, I tend to, I guess, almost be like an assassin. I come in, I do my job, and then I leave. Whereas you've had some like longer term relationships where you really get embedded with the team. And so you can speak a lot more to that whole idea of like having to really care about the whole team dynamic versus me, where I'm mostly thinking about my stakeholder and the person who's making the decision to pay me and to rehire me later. So for me, I'll go through mine. It's going to be I guess you could roughly break it down to like things you can do before an engagement even starts to set yourself up for a good relationship with the client, and then some of the things you can do throughout. And then, yeah, we'll get right to your list as well. So the first thing, long before a project even starts, this is often, you can suss this out when you get that first email, and that is you will always do a poor job for poor fit clients. So if you can afford to say no to a poor fit client, even if things are a little slow, just say no. I know I've done this myself where, leads slow down maybe for a couple of weeks and the negative thoughts start creeping into your mind. And then this poor fit client comes into your inbox and you say yes, and you immediately regret it because the project doesn't go very well. You don't enjoy working with this client at all. And of course, now that you're booked up, that's when like an amazing project comes into your inbox and they're not willing to wait. And so you've basically sacrificed an amazing project for something that's just like subpar for everybody. So that's a mistake that a lot of people are going to make in the early days, especially when you might run into a period where things slow down a little bit. If you can afford to, don't do it. So the next point is to not oversell. So a client will come to you, and this will often be like a newer client, especially where they'll have this idea and they'll be super enthusiastic that they want to more or less blow their entire budget on a brand new website and a bunch of emails because they're super eager. They want to get those sales, and an experienced freelancer or consultant knows that if a startup is really new and they're kind of pre-revenue, they don't have customers yet, what's going to happen is you're going to go through all this work of creating a website. There's going to be a ton of guesswork because you don't have customers to talk to yet. They're going to go live with the website. They're going to get some customers, and then everything or so much of what you've done anyways is going to be obsolete or wrong because you're going to learn new things. The company might pivot entirely, and they've just blown a bunch of money. And sure, you walk away, with whatever money you agreed to at that point, but they're not going to have any good thoughts towards you, and they're not going to be looking to work with you again in the future. So one thing that I've done multiple times in the past, and a story that comes to mind, is one with a very small self-funded startup. So this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, I guess now. They came to me, that eager self-funded startup that wanted everything. And I basically told them, you don't need this yet for the reasons that I just mentioned. Instead, let me just go through what you've got, and I'll point out some areas where I think you guys can make some improvement yourselves really quickly. Then when you get those first customers and you have some revenue coming in and we have some people we can actually learn from, then reach out and we can talk about a project. And I think they really appreciated that because they took my advice, they made some changes, the website did well, they got some customers, and then a few years later, they reached out. They're doing over $1 million ARR, still completely self-funded. And they were just like, hey, Josh, here's $25,000. Let us know what you want to do with it. And they wouldn't have done that if I sold them on that website project on day one because it would have been a flop for them. Whereas now they know that I'm actually interested in like helping them succeed. I'm not just trying to get as much as I can out of them at any one time. So do that and stay in the game long enough, 7, 10, 15, 20 years, like you're just going to have a lot of this coming back to you, all those good deeds that you did early on. Plus, it just feels good to be a nice person. Another thing that I think a lot of new freelancers will do is they will paint like a rosy picture in that early evaluation phase about like timelines and what they're actually going to be able to deliver in order to actually land the job. And this is just going to set you up for failure because, you're going to say, we're going to have everything done in 4 weeks. Knowing in your head, like that's a stretch. It's probably going to be more like 6 to 8 if you're being realistic. But you say that in order to get the job. They sign the contract, they pay you, you deliver late, and now you're just another statistic. And why so many people hate hiring freelancers. It's exactly for this because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And I guess I think it's real quick. I think it's also worth pointing out that all of the things that you've listed so far are like mistakes that people listening, like just because to look out for those, like you'll probably still make those mistakes at some point. And
yeah, a lot of this is from experience.
Sometimes it's mistakes that you kind of maybe have to make in order to learn from them. Like, like the timeline, overselling the timeline thing. I mean, I've made that mistake embarrassingly recently.
Yeah, and I think when most people make that mistake, like I don't think they're doing it like in their head thinking like I'm going to say I'm going to get it done in 4. I know I'm not going to get it done in 8. Really, what they're
trick
thinking
yourself.
I really want this, and I can do it in 4 weeks if I really put my head down and do it. And it's very different. There's probably some people that like just straight out lie, knowing they're not going to do it. They're not even going to try. But for most people, it's just your brain playing tricks on you so that you can say yes to this project and get paid. And I understand it, but eventually you're going to want to not do that, because these are clients that you're going to work with one time, and who knows what they say about you behind closed doors, and they're probably not going to come knocking for work in the future. Um, and worse than that, not only will they not come knocking, neither will all the people that you interacted with as they move to other companies. And that becomes like an exponential mistake.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's big.
Yeah. So I guess kind of related, like setting expectations early and making sure that's all like detailed, ironclad in a contract. So much happens when either there is no contract, which is a massive mistake, or it's just like a super, loosey-goosey contract without any real details or consequences for certain types of actions. And then, the client gets thrown off guard when you push back on something and you're like, no, I'm not going to do this unless, we add to the scope and there's this fee attached to it. So make sure that you actually do set those expectations early and have it outlined in a contract. Work with a lawyer if you need to. But there's also there's plenty of good templates out there as well if you want like a starting point. I think a lot of freelancers struggle with communication. They would rather, especially copywriters, like we've said on other episodes, we tend to be an introverted type, and so we're happy to close a project, get paid, and then we're just going to disappear, do our work for a month, and then come back to you when it's all done. And what ends up happening is you don't get to the end of that month uninterrupted. The client instead starts poking you, wondering where things are happening. And as soon as they start doing that, they start having doubts in their mind. Like, is this guy doing the work? Is it going to be any good? Is this going to be just another flaky freelancer? So if you can set like a regular cadence to let them know what you've done, and just as importantly, to let them know what you haven't done. If things are running behind, people are far more receptive to that. If you say like, hey, we're a week behind on this for this reason. I should have this to you for next Friday. And that's usually pretty good for a lot of people. It's rare that it's not. Like we're not saving babies in this line of business. So people can usually wait a week if that's what it takes. So just make sure you're communicating proactively and not waiting to be poked all the time.
Yeah. And just to give just to add some specificity to that, like for me personally, I never go more than a week I never go more than 7 days without communicating with the client. For most of my projects, I have a weekly sync with them. But if for whatever reason we're not having calls once a week, I would never go more than 7 days without letting someone know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good rule. Even make it just a point, like every Friday or whatever, like block off a little bit of time where, say you're working with 2 or 3 people, like you're just going to touch base with all 3 of them. You could probably knock that out in 15, 20 minutes. It's not too hard.
Yeah, here's where I am and here's what to expect next and when.
And you would be amazed, like that sets you apart. It's that easy to set yourself apart as a freelancer.
There's so many freelancers who are just setting the bar real nice and low for us.
It's perfect.
So we can do these little, I have clients say things sometimes where they're impressed with something that I do that just seems so basic to me. Or I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean no one else does that?
It's true. I mean, we're competing against like the freelancer.com crowd, the Fiverr crowd. Like these are all touch points that a lot of clients have had. And so if you can give them that, and this doesn't seem like a premium experience, but if you can give them this type of experience, it's a premium experience. The next one, I think this is one you're going to have more to say on because of how like closely you work with a lot of people. But even still, like I've got an example from this past weekend working with Circle. We were just wrapping something up for a launch. And I noticed that my main touch point there, she was working on the weekend, putting things together for me so that I could like finish the project off. And I just recognized her. I was like, hey, like, I appreciate you. I know that this is not the only thing you're doing for this launch. I see what you're doing. You're working on Sunday, making sure that I have everything I need to finish this off. You're like, awesome. You did a great job. And I think that just goes a long way because appreciation and recognition, like we're all starving for it. It's a common complaint among freelancers where most clients feel like all they have to do is just pay you on time and that's thank you enough, where it does still feel nice when a client says like, hey, you did a great job and we got these results. Like we like to hear those things. It's not just
I need that thank you.
Yeah. And like, have you ever had this? I've had this where I'll finish a project with a client and I'm super interested about how it went. I see the page has been live for a while, so I reach out like 6 months later and I'm wondering like did I completely fail or something? Like you haven't said anything. And I reach out, they're like, oh yeah, it was awesome. Like we increased signups by 35% and we're planning on reaching out to you next quarter for another project. I was like, sweet, like it would have been awesome if you let me know because I've been thinking that I had just like completely failed.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, and that's happening inside companies too. They wait for like an employee like performance review to say like the good things that they're doing versus like day to day recognizing it. So that is a great way to get into people's good books. So that when the next project comes up, that person that you recognize is like, hey, why don't we get Josh? I kind of like working with that guy.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about him, but there's something
Yeah.
about him
Yeah.
that
And the next one, I think it's similar to something we've said in other episodes where like you want to go beyond just executing and kind of get into that advisor, expert, consultant realm. So you want to do that, but at the end of the day, we have to remember like we are service providers and they're paying us the bills. They're paying our bills. So don't be a diva about your advice and your suggestions. And so what I would do here, and I've had to do this in the past, and it usually works, and that is once it's clear that the client for whatever reason is not seeing eye to eye with me anymore, and we disagree. Like it's one thing if a client doesn't agree with me and they make a good point, and then I change my mind. But if they're not agreeing with me and I don't see the points that they're trying to make, you have to let them know that you're stepping out of the driver's seat now. They're in the driver's seat. You're in the passenger seat. You're here to help them. Your co-pilot, help them get to the finish line. But they're going to have to do some extra work to guide you because these are not your ideas anymore. They're not your views, and so they have to make sure that they can communicate, what it is that they're thinking about. And so, just being really open in that situation is key. And again, like not being that diva who just like sticks to your idea no matter what, and like you just refuse to do the work unless they come to your side. Because again, at the end of the day, we are service providers, whether we like it or not. And I guess the last one, and I've got a real example for this one, is to surprise clients with an extra deliverable, but don't do it when you're asked. So, for example, I was recently working with a company called TrueClicks. They had hired another freelancer to do a video script. They did not really like the video script and they wanted to see if I could kind of give it a once over, and they were willing to pay me to do that and just to try to make it a little bit better. I looked at it and I was like, I've already gone through the customer research. I've written the web pages. I know all about the product and the customer. Rather than go through and try to change a few words, which I don't think would really make a big enough improvement because they kind of missed the big ideas, I'm just going to scrap this, rewrite a new one. It literally took me like 20 or 30 minutes because I could just borrow so much of what I had used and adapt it to the video script. And I sent it over and I said, don't worry about paying me. Like this one's on me. And they were super thankful. And those are the types of things, again, stay in the game 5, 10, 15 years, like those little acts of where you build goodwill, they're going to come back. That company is going to be a $5 million company and then a $10 million company. And the employees that are there are going to move to other companies. And that's how you just end up having a steady stream of business without ever doing cold outreach. It's just time and doing these types of like good acts throughout your career. Yeah, so that pretty much brings me to the end of mine. You could see that like for me, it's mostly about like how do I have a good relationship with my like stakeholder because I'm not usually working too closely with the team. Whereas for you, I mean, I'm probably going to learn a lot here too because you actually do work pretty close with your team.
Yeah, and I think like the main contact, like obviously that person is probably the most important, like whoever brought you in and whoever you're working with is the most important. But yeah, I just sort of tackled this from just because of the way the question was worded, I just decided to tackle this from the perspective of people who are on the team is beyond that main contact. And just to sort of add on to the point that you were sort of saying before about the company turns into a $5 million company and people leave and go elsewhere. You know, going back to like at the beginning of this conversation where we talked about like what's the good like what are some good reasons to want to stay in everyone's good books. That one where people go to other companies, that cannot be understated. Like
No.
just if I look at the trajectory of how things are going for me right now in terms of getting business from people who have left a company that I work with and went somewhere else. Like if that trajectory continues, that might be my new business strategy in a few years, is
The
like
thing is, it
wait
will
for
continue.
people to go to another company. Yeah, because
Because
churn is high.
yeah,
People are leaving companies. They don't stay. Nobody stays at a company for 15 years anymore,
no,
especially not in tech. So, you know, I've had people leave. I've had my main contact leave the company in the middle of a project, which can be a mess and that can suck,
yeah,
but it can also open another door to something else. So, you know, that's something that I should have added in the beginning of like, you know, one good reason to stay in it. And it's multiple people from the same company, you know, two people. I've worked at companies where two people who I was working for went to work at other companies, and both of them are talking to me about, hey, can you come do something similar for this company? So
yeah.
that's really big.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
before you jump into your list there, like I think that this is definitely something that's going to continue. If you think about it, like you said, you don't stay at a company for 15 years. They're usually moving every 2 to 3 years, often for a promotion. And the other thing that I do anyways is I'll often ask people, like prospective clients, like, why now? Like what's happening that makes this the right time for new business? And they'll be for a new project, and they'll be like, well, you know, I just got hired as CMO 2 months ago. So like first, like once you join a company, that is often the driver to kind of undertake this, especially when your main point of contact is like a marketing like VP or like a CMO. That's one of the first things they love to do is like, I
Kill the
don't agree with the way
website.
the brand, kill the website, kill the messaging. We're going to burn this down and start from the ground up. And then, yeah, so combine that with people leaving all the time. And it's a pretty reliable way to get business over the years.
It is, and it's smart for them to do that, because if you know, if you're the new CMO and you go with the previous CMO's ideas and it works out, well, then you didn't do that. That was their work. But
Yeah,
if it
exactly.
fails, you're still on the hook. Like, why didn't you get
Yeah.
rid of that? So
Yeah.
that's yeah. So new business strategy just is churn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Built in.
Yeah, cool. So I have a list here, and again, these are a little bit more focused on the rest of the team beyond just that main contact, and I'll try to whip
Hmm.
through them because I don't want to go on too long here. So the first one is to respect their expertise. So I always like to treat the other people on my client's team like they are an expert in what they do, the same way that I am an expert in what I do. So I'm not above them, I'm not below them, we're just equals. So, you know, when I meet with someone on my client's team, let's say it's, you know, they put me in touch with someone on sales or someone on the product team who's going to walk me through a product demo or something like that. You know, I might say early on that call something to the effect of, you know, hey, my name is Andrew. I was brought in by so-and-so to help with X, Y, and Z. And a key part of my process is to, you know, learn from your expertise. So, you know, just kind of like framing things as around your respect of their expertise. The next thing, which is related, is flattery. So if you have an opportunity, if you see an opportunity to give someone a genuine compliment, and this is, you know, goes right along with what Josh was talking about earlier about, you know, showing appreciation. You know, always look for opportunities to do that and just be genuine with it. You know, you don't want people to feel like you're trying to push some button of like, you know, flattery. Flattery might not be the best word for it, because it's the connotation is that you're really trying to butter someone up, and really it's more just about giving kudos and being genuine. People really do appreciate that. They
Hmm.
appreciate being appreciated. Once again, along the same lines, reward good behavior. So if I ask someone, let's say I reach out to someone on the sales team and I say, hey, the CMO said I could reach out. Here's what I'm working on. Do you have 30 minutes, or you can just sort of, again, talk me through, like, you know, so I can learn from your expertise or whatever. And if that person replies to you quickly and says, yeah, sure, I'm available at this time, or whatever, or if you're asking for access to a tool or, you know, a presentation deck, you know, say something like, thanks for getting back to me so quickly, or thanks for getting this to me so quickly. This is going to go a long way in helping me get up to speed. So just like, again, just being specific and about your appreciation.
Hmm.
Another big tip is to speak to all of the stakeholders, everyone who's going to be involved in reviewing your copy. Speak to them before you write anything. You and I have talked before about how we both use outlines and get people to agree on the general structure before we actually write anything. And that's to avoid the extremely unpleasant experience of presenting copy or sending copy to a team that is not happy with it. And so if you do that, if you speak to people early on, it gives you an opportunity to know what they might object to in advance. And if you use outlines and have people approve those before you move forward, it's gonna help you avoid that extremely unpleasant feeling at the end where people want to just like start trying to cut up your copy. It's the most miserable experience in the world.
And make sure that's reflected in your contract as well, like in the scope, so that if they deviate at that copy, like after you've written copy, they're not like thrown off by you sending another statement of work with an invoice.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe this could be its own tip almost, but I've started putting in my contracts before I have the terms, which is like the legal language. I have this like basically one pager of what I call like expectations, and they're framed as mutual expectations. So it's not just like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do the other thing. I have all these like emojis in it to make it like kind of more palatable and pleasant and make it look like we're having fun.
Your contract seems a lot nicer than mine.
Well, this is just one part of the contract.
Okay.
So then it goes right into the terms where it's like liability.
Yeah.
But in that section, it has things about like, this is how the feedback process is going to go. And it's framed as, it's not like, this is how it is because I'm a diva and I dictate the rules, but it's framed as, this is how the feedback process is going to go, because it's going to help us get the best work possible out the door with the least friction and headache. So framing things that way, but again, it goes back to what you were talking about, setting those expectations early is always going to be better. Surprises should only be happy surprises. Ideally.
Yeah, exactly.
like, hey, I added something to the scope for you that you didn't ask for.
Yep.
Just a couple more quick ones. So I have here, avoid going negative. So sometimes something happens, the client or someone on their team does something that is super obnoxious. It might be something that's completely contrary to what you've agreed upon, maybe in the contract, or they just do something obnoxious. And your reaction is to get angry, resentful, whatever. And what you want to do is you want to say, hey, we agreed on this, and why aren't you doing that? And to go really negative about it. And so my suggestion is, just because you feel really negative doesn't mean that you go negative. So, if you're really annoyed, you can go vent to someone who's comfortable listening to you. Maybe type out like the email that you want to send, like whatever.
That's a good idea.
Whatever you have to do to kind of like get that out of your system, and then take a deep breath, put back your like calm professional face on, and handle it from that place. If I'm getting into like, if things are getting negative, like I'm kind of letting my client have it in any way, things have gotten really bad. And so I will say there have been many experiences where I wanted to go negative, but most of those times it wouldn't have been helpful to go negative. Like that's something that I reserve for when things have gone so far off the rails, and I feel like they're trying to screw me.
Yeah. Related.
Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're starting to feel super negative, or you think someone is being negative towards you, sometimes it's a good idea to get on a call, because oftentimes it's you're reading tone that isn't actually there. They're short because they're rushed. You're reading them being short because they don't like you and they're mad at you. So sometimes just getting on a call, like hashing it out, you have like two human faces, like turn the video on, and they'll probably be a little nicer to you too. And then you can move forward that way, versus like going back and forth and long email chains is like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think part of what comes with experience is like learning to listen to that and get on that call faster, because the longer that you wait, the longer you're going to be stressed, and it's going to just kind of fester and get worse. So as soon as I start, if you see something, you have like, it's an outline and you have these comments on there that feel like they're off base or very curt and not nice. That's the sign where you go, oh, we need to switch from async communication to synchronous communication, which is a fancy way of saying get off of Slack or whatever and get onto Zoom. Things clear up a lot faster. People are nicer when they're face to face. So that's a huge tip. Myra did ask about the finance team. I don't have a ton of advice here. My contact with the finance team is limited to mostly me sending invoices and then
Me
them
too.
paying it, which is how the relationship should be, hopefully.
Hmm.
But just in general, be polite and make their job as easy as possible. So if you find that people are saying, "Hey, can you please include this on the invoice?" Just start adding that stuff to the invoice. So at this point, I have a whole boilerplate thing of, if you're paying by wire from the US, do it like this. If you're outside the US, here's the code that you need for that, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
If you're paying by credit card, do this. So just making their job easy, being polite. That's as simple. That's really all it is. And I don't think your involvement with the finance team should be any more than that.
No, I don't think I've ever been
Yeah.
beyond that.
One last bonus tip is if you are the kind of person who enjoys giving people gifts, you can always send gifts or cards. So typically for most engagements, I'll often send a gift to my main contacts, like whoever brought me into the project. I'll probably send them something that's usually like a bottle of alcohol or something like that. And then if I have long-term collaborators that I'm working with, so I've had companies that I've worked with for like a year plus, and I get pretty close with the designer, for example. At the end of a project, that designer is going to get a bottle of champagne with a nice note or something like that. And this isn't the kind of thing that you have to do, but if you enjoy giving gifts, it's kind of a no-brainer. Just helps cement you as the favorite and the
Yeah.
obvious choice, I think. So.
Yeah, then when that designer sees that there might be an opportunity for a copywriting project and they look at their liquor cabinet and their scotch is running low, they're like, let's get Andrew in here and he'll send me a new bottle. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
Awesome. Anything else you want to cover on this?
I don't think so. I think that was a lot. So a lot of good stuff for people to take and run with.
Yeah, I think it sums everything up. And a lot of this I know like sounds really basic, but honestly, if you're a freelancer and you do 50% of this stuff, like you are far beyond most freelance experiences that people have had. So definitely don't downplay it, even though it sounds so simple. All right, we will end it there.
Awesome.